successor. So this is the anointing of Jesus. Um, it's well attested from Marcion's Gospel by Epiphanius and Tertullian. Um, Note that this happens right after the story about John and John's imprisonment. And it's a woman. The woman is not identified in the attestations, but Mary is mentioned right after the beginning of Luke 8, probably in Marcion's Gospel, and then in canonical Luke as well. So I tend to see this as Mary Magdalene. And the way that this makes sense as a coherent narrative to me is that Mary Magdalene was probably a follower of John the Baptist. And then once John the Baptist was put in prison by Herod, that she became a patron to Jesus and helped fund his ministry. So this is the very first anointing of Jesus in Marcion's Gospel. There's no baptism. So to me, this is actually where Jesus becomes the Messiah, right? He is anointed. He's anointed by a woman. It's probably Mary. So she is co-founding this movement together with him. That's the way that this reads most reasonably to me. Again, no calling of male disciples. Well, you have to get into the whole Q mark stuff here, but I don't want to go too deep into that. But in canonical Luke, we have very clear Odyssean references, especially as this gets retold in Mark and in Matthew, where we have like overt discussions about loving the person and maybe a sense of loyalty. We have maybe a character that's like a domestic rival, like Odysseus, the suitors that had invaded Odysseus' house to get Penelope. The Pharisee almost takes the role here of a domestic rival. So we don't know anything about a Pharisee being like a domestic rival or getting in a debate or argument with Jesus in Marcion's Gospel. And then just note that Mark and Matthew move this story to the end of their Gospel, right before Jesus' death, which fits the Odyssey, where Jesus is, where Jesus is being anointed for his death. But in the Odyssey, the story of recognition, when Odysseus comes back home, happens at the end of the narrative. And the whole Eurycleia thing that imitates Odysseus' female slave who recognizes him. So the whole, like, your story will be known far and wide. It's pretty clearly playing on Eurycleia, which means fame far and wide, right? So that's in Mark and Matthew, who again put this at the end. It's not in Marcion's Gospel. So there's no overt Eurycleia imitation in Marcion's Gospel, and there's no overt Odyssey or Odyssean representation. It's probably just a more simple story about Mary Magdalene and Jesus becoming the Messiah that gets turned into a more epic story of recognition in canonical Luke. The next thing, Jesus being sponsored